Good evening. Woo! Tough crowd. My name is Craig McLeod. It's good to be here. It's good to be anywhere, really, isn't it? Let's face it, I'm getting older. You're not that old, but just turned 40. You look really good for your age. Thanks. But you know, with age comes responsibility, I suppose. Freshly divorced, 8 years ago, so coming to terms with that. But it's good being divorced. It's good because she hated me and I hated her, so win-win situation. It's fair to say it's a really good wedding, but the marriage was fucked from the start. Because as soon as we got married, we were still arguing about the things that we said we weren't going to argue about before we got married. Petty things like she was still squeezing the toothpaste from the top of the tube, and I was still banging her sister. Petty. But she was a Kiwi, is a Kiwi. Any Kiwis in tonight? I love Kiwis. They're pretty funny. But when I first came to Australia, I didn't actually realise there was a difference between the Australian and the New Zealand accent. But I worked this out when I was working in Coles in Port Douglas, when these two chaps approached me at the deli counter and they said, "Can you please tell me where your chully bun is?" I said, "What the fuck is a chully bun?" They said, "Oh, the chully bun." I said, "Is it a cake?" They said, "No, it's a frudge." I said, "What the fuck is a frudge?" They said, "Oh, it's where you keep your cold drinks." And I was like, "Oh, you mean fridge?" It's over there, you pair of ducks. I think what happened was, back in the day, the English sent the criminals to Australia and the stupid people to New Zealand. They were like, "We're going to have a laugh here. Let's teach them the wrong vowels." In a couple of 100 years, it will be fucking hilarious. Well played, England. Well played. But I'm pretty new to Sydney from Melbourne. And I love Sydney. Melbourne's alright, but they essentially seem very similar to me, But a couple of differences. Sydney's got a few more beaches, Melbourne's got a few more scarves. But the main difference seems to be that in Melbourne they like AFL, and in Sydney they like NRL. So when I moved here, I wanted to pick a team, get involved, be interested. And then I watched it. And that's where my interest ended, because I guess I don't really understand it. I watched it a few times, and the only thing I seem to get from it is it appears to be a sport that reintroduces sex offenders into the community. I did that joke at a gig last week, and some guy in an NRL costume came up to me afterwards. And said, "I took offence to your NRL gag." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Some of my best friends are sex offenders." True story. We got any Italians in tonight? Doesn't matter. I really like Italian names. I think they're a lot more interesting than English names, The Italians have got Gianfranco and Gianluca and Gianmarco, and many Gians. And my favourite name though is Giuseppe, and I was doing some research into that. Giuseppe means lover of gypsies, which is nice, because the English equivalent is Gary. So. Good evening to any Garys we have today. I'm a big fan of documentaries. Any fans? My favourite documentary was this British one that was set in the 90s in London about the police force, and I think it was shown on ABC a few years ago in Australia, so some of you might have heard of it. It was called The Bill. It's a good documentary, and I love The Bill, and what I worked out was the show title didn't often reflect what the documentary was about. So, is your name Josh? What is your name? Zach. I'm going to give you a couple of show titles, see if you can guess what they were about. The first one was called Cops and Robbers. What do you reckon that was about? Cops. Good guess. It was, in fact, about paedophiles. Or pedos, as they like to say in England. The second one was called Love as a Drug. What do you reckon that's about? Brilliant guess. It's about pedos. And the last one's called Stay Away from Our Schools. What do you reckon that's about? Illegal immigrants. Who were convicted pedos, so you were half right. I'll end on this. I can't stand pigeons. Anyone with me? Yes. It's good. It's good. I could quite happily kick a pigeon in the head. Snap its neck, stop it from going. Because pigeons basically are the junkie equivalent of birds. Begging for McDonald's chips and throwing them over the heads because they can't eat properly. I was wanting to take pity on a pigeon, you know, and attach a plastic fork to its left wing and squeegee to its right wing, so it can eat properly and earn a living. But I didn't want to touch the filthy fucker. But the reason I'm not going to kick a pigeon, because if you kick a pigeon in Australia and it dies, you can get 2 years in prison. And it would be pretty embarrassing going to prison with rapists and murderers, where all you did was kick a pigeon. Because inevitably, it would come up in conversation. Quite possibly over a bar of soap. As to why you're in here, and you have to say, I know, killed a bird. Yeah, me too, I stabbed my wife in the face. Who did you kill? Ooh. Some junky, street-looking kind of bird. You're that pigeon bloke, aren't you?